Okay, so I may have over-exaggerated just a bit when I ended off my last review. After watching through In the Garden of Good and Eddie a second time, I managed to find a few more positive things to say about it than I had initially anticipated. That doesn't mean I'd say it's one of the best episodes of the reboot, but I'd probably place this one smack dab in the middle of the spectrum instead of at the bottom like I had originally intended to. It has some things going for it, although it has its problems too. There are ways to make a character annoying to others in a show while simultaneously keeping them entertaining to the audience. Take someone like, say, Billy from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, or even SpongeBob from SpongeBob SquarePants. All of them bother the hell out of all the other characters on screen, but they make us laugh. However, if a character on screen is just as irritating to the ones watching as they are to the other characters in the show, then there's clearly a problem. I've seen some people say that her whole gimmick is to be annoying, so if I'm bothered by her, then she's doing her job perfectly, but I highly disagree with that idea. The worst thing a character like this can be is annoying just for the sake of being annoying, and Eddie is a one-note placeholder that fits that bill. This episode starts in the girls' own backyard, where we see the three of them planting a bunch of vegetables for an upcoming festival involving friendly competition, extravagant horticulture, and murder, apparently. That's all we really get to see before we skip ahead a full week later out of the blue.
So girls, how is your vegetable garden growing?
Not surprisingly, the girls completely neglected their vegetable garden over the past week, so everything they planted never had the chance to grow. And what did the girls do in this situation? Well, blame Bubbles, of course. I've begun to notice that there have been a lot of running jokes throughout most of these episodes as of late. Antidote Time, the Unicorn Magic, Matt Manser getting ignored, Buttercup Zoomsby, and now this. I kinda wish there was a little more variety here instead of just repeating the same joke over and over again each episode. That formula's starting to get a little stale. Buttercup then gets the idea to grab a bunch of different fertilizers for their garden so they can grow their tomato plants ultra quickly, despite Blossom's observation of the warning labels on the bags. Also, Bubbles mentioned something about beans.
Plus these 5 beans, which I got by trading 5 other beans.
Where's the joke?
And here's something I still can't comprehend ever since the first time I watched it. What purpose do these beans serve? Like, Bubbles flies around and plants them, but it's heavily implied that the mixing of the fertilizer is what caused the plants to grow so huge, not the beans. And if they're implied to be what the tomatoes grew from, well, that's
Impossible.
Tomatoes grow from seeds, not beans. So the girls ultimately decide to take the risk, and the next day we see them sitting at the table with the professor once again.
So girls, how is your vegetable garden growing?
Nice reuse of a voice clip there, guys. Way to save yourselves a whopping 5 seconds of audio editing. Although, one thing I can actually compliment the animators for is this little gag with the professor's book here. The change between shots is subtle, yet clever. I like that. The girls go outside to see how their garden turned out, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't like the art direction in these particular shots. The lighting effects on top of the natural plant life is quite astonishing if I do say so myself. Unfortunately for our... well, I was about to say heroes, but they aren't really heroes anymore, are they? Unfortunately for our moderately gifted main characters that selectively decide when they do or do not wish to use their superpowered capabilities, there's a giant insect running around devouring all of their tomatoes.
I'm such a jerk.
You can say that again.
I'm such a jerk.
In actuality, this thing is a tomato worm named Tabitha, although she prefers to go by the name Eddie. Why, you may ask?
Good question.
As you probably could have guessed, the magic of mixing everyday fertilizer not only causes the plants to grow to a tremendous size, but all of the insects and other creatures as well. Though this begs the question, where are all of the other bugs that were in the garden? You can't expect me to believe that a huge bed like this only had one insect in the entire patch of soil. Then again, I don't really think I want more than one of these characters roaming around anyways, so maybe this isn't so bad after all. Eddie here has a bit of a bad habit of eating everything in sight when she gets anxious, which becomes pretty obvious when she tries to chomp down on the girl's very last tomato. Of course, this angers the girls, so they decide to try and leave her behind while taking their tomato to Veggie Fest, but alas, the talking mutant worm overhears them and invites herself along for the ride. One fast forward gag later, the 4 arrive at the entrance and Eddie dives right in, though the girls aren't nearly as happy about being there as they once were.
Here you go, the biggest zucchini we got.
No! Little Mickey hates zucchini!
Why is that funny?
I don't know.
The girls start to head into the festival so they can enter their tomato in the competition, but little do they know that Eddie is currently tearing up the place. Strange how these people wouldn't question a giant insect wandering around a festival eating their food, but heck, I'm sure the citizens of Townsville have seen worse in their days. Their anger causes Eddie to become extremely anxious once again, and she ends up taking a few bites out of the girls' tomato before they can enter it in the contest. This pretty much marks the tipping point for the girls, because after this moment they begin to go off on Eddie for how annoying and rude she was over however long she's been with them.
What the fuck are you doing?
Sorry.
No, don't just be sorry. Think for 1 fucking second. Are you professional or not?
Yes, I am.
Do I fucking walk around and rip down? No, shut the fuck up, Bruce. Do I want? No! No! What don't you fucking understand? Fuck's sake, man, you're amateur.
Whoa.
Okay, real talk for a second here. I get that a lot of other people like this gag. I've seen many users say this is one of the best jokes the reboot has had, and that's fine. If you liked it, then good for you. Based on Reboot Bubbles' behavior in the past, this still isn't funny to me because I've already seen her get angry in like 15 other episodes before this one. The fact that they're continuing to run this joke into the ground has made me sick of seeing Bubbles do this sort of thing. But again, this is just my opinion. Before the girls can go apologize to Eddie for saying the things that they did, Mojo shows up. Hold the phone. Is Mojo actually being competent for once? All sarcasm aside, I want to point out the fact that Mojo is attacking the town with an evil scheme for the first time in the entire show. Bear in mind that this is episode 26, meaning that this would have been during the final episode of season 1 of the original series. Now, is he a perfect representation of the original? Well, no, but this is a major step up from all of his other appearances so far. Executing a legitimately evil plan?
Prepare to meet your doom, VeggieFest patrons!
Check. Mojo makes an aside to himself in the middle of his monologue?
And I may have cried myself to sleep that night.
Check. Mojo having a kinda ridiculous reason for doing so?
Last year, my giant steamy beanie broccolini took second place at your pathetic VeggieFest.
Did he say broccolini?
Broccolini's for weenies.
Repetitive dialogue that reinstates the same thing over and over again?
Or onions make you cry.
Well, it was only this one line, but that's better than nothing. Curses?
Curses!
Check. So yeah, I'd say we have a winner here. But now this begs the question, why did it take this long? Why wasn't he like this in the previous episodes he appeared in? I have to wonder if the writers on this show even talked to each other when writing their respective episodes. Like, were they all just told to come up with their own ideas without any collaboration and slap them together? You would think that something like this wouldn't happen when you have the same 2 people heading all of the stories in this show. Other shows have had someone act out of character from time to time, but it's so frequent in this one in particular because their behaviors are different every single episode. I can let a few mistakes slide here and there, but this is such a common occurrence that it's impossible to tell what their true personalities are meant to be. But I digress. So the onion monster begins to attack the festival and the girls decide to spring into action, though they catch a huge whiff of the monster's stench which stops them in their tracks. Blossom attempts to defeat the mutant onion by using a fan to blow the horrid smell away, but it ultimately fails when the monster outsmarts her. No, I don't think outsmart is the proper word. It's more like outcommon senses her.
Oh no! It's us, the lady!
Buttercup and Bubbles proceed to follow suit at the expense of Robin's suffering, and thus Mojo proclaims his victory over the girls. Unfortunately for him, Eddie comes back to feast on the onion while Mojo is gloating and ultimately ruins his plan. And thus marks another instance where someone else has to save the girls because they can't do it themselves. And so we get the conclusion of the episode where Eddie goes on to explain her epiphany to the girls and how she's grateful for them making her think about the choices she's made and, well, just see for yourself.
You made me think. Think about the choices I've made in my life and the tomato worm
Yep, that's it. Eddie's dead now, the episode's over. I don't think there's anything else worth mentioning, so that's gonna do it for my review of— oh, wait, there's more. Eddie undergoes metamorphosis in about 10 seconds flat and ends up becoming a butterfly. Now, if you've seen my Cheap Thrills review, you can probably guess what I'm about to discuss. Back when we first met Eddie, it was stated that she was a tomato worm, not a caterpillar, right?
I'm a tomato worm.
Right. so now she's turned into a butterfly, which is apparent by both her physical appearance and Blossom's utterance of said fact.
She turned into a butterfly.
This entire process is completely impossible due to the simple fact that tomato hornworms do not become butterflies, they become moths. In the same way that Sheepy could not be related to a chinchilla, Eddie cannot be related to a butterfly. It would take you less than 10 seconds to look this fact up on Google. Metamorphosis also tends to be a lot longer than a few seconds, by the way, so in reality Eddie would actually be stuck there for a good while before hatching out of her frozen state. After everyone apologizes to each other, Eddie flies out into the sunset and the episode draws to a close with her continuing to crash into things as if nothing ever changed. Here's a question. What significance does Eddie becoming what should be a moth actually serve? Unless this is meant to signify a growth in her character or something, then I would understand. But that's just it. She didn't grow. At least, I don't think she did. She's still just as annoying now as she was before, and she's still doing clumsy things the same way the old Eddie would. The only thing that seems to have changed with her character was her overly large appetite. Now, considering the fact that most butterflies and moths do not eat nearly as much as they did when they were in their younger stages of life, did the girls really change her for the better, or was it more of a genetic thing? These are the reasons why I'm not entirely convinced she's a better Eddie at all. Also, one major missed opportunity that I think would have really suited this episode was a reference to Chemical X. Considering it has yet to be mentioned even once in the show itself, and the garden grew rapidly in such a short amount of time, wouldn't it have been the perfect explanation for such an occurrence rather than just mixing fertilizers together? Come on, that would have been so fitting! And can you guess which episode from the original series this one rips off? If you guessed Slave the Day, you'd be right. Each of these episodes has a large, oblivious, bothersome, and accidentally violent character that irritates our main characters for a good chunk of the episode without realizing the consequences of their own behavior. It gets to the point where one of the girls cannot take it anymore and proceeds to let it all out at once, causing the nuisance character to be upset and go away crying. The girls feel bad about what they've done, and then they get attacked by an evil villain. They cannot escape from said villain until the annoying character steps in to save them, to which the girls respond by thanking them. The difference is the original made a joke out of it where the girls proceed to beat up Big Billy for putting them there in the first place, rather than doing what the reboot does by playing it straight. So ultimately, this episode has its problems, but it did have some things going for it that I can compliment, like the minor details I mentioned throughout the review, Mojo's performance, and also the fight, which actually had a little more substance to it compared to previous episodes. The girls were willing to spring into action, and even though they went down pretty easily, it was miles better than the other ones we've been getting as of late. Overall, it's just okay, I guess.
Finally, I'm a beautiful